Hi guys and welcome back. Today is going to be a color composition video, and like my complementary color one, this one is going to be nice and short and sweet, and I just want to talk a little bit about one of the color schemes and I'm going to use it, and then that's pretty much it. I'll link down in the description to the other one that I did, the complementary color scheme. And today we are working in Triadic, and that is where you have three colors that are equidistant from each other on the color wheel. So the most go-to thought of one is the primary colors, actually. So red, yellow, and blue, that is a triadic color scheme. And as usual, I like to create a piece before I figure out what colors I'm going to use for the color palette, because it does change very much depending on the mood that I want to go with, as well as the different shapes and what things I need to have contrasted and what things need to be a focal point. So there's a lot of things to consider about how I want to break up the color. So this is the sketch that I originally began with. The final is actually going to be in watercolor, and that will happen in just a minute, but right now I wanted to show you what the sketch originally looks like. So I plotted this out, and I can see that there's going to be basically four different shapes. So we have the crown, the smoke, the hand, and the background. And I know that I wanted to group two of them together. And I will definitely be talking more about triadic color palettes and how I actually use it in this piece when I get to the painting side of this one. And let's get into the final piece. So this is not the final. I started painting it and I just really was not happy with it. I was really struggling, so I decided to restart the piece. But I am showing you the original line work because I used my Colorious pencil to transfer it first and then inked it without a light box, which is much easier to see when I'm drawing the stuff. But the second version, I skipped that step and I just line worked it right on top of the light box. So I do want to go ahead and show you the one that's easier to follow, but there are some distinct differences. So when you see those changes and they've magically changed, that is why it's actually a completely new painting at that point. But I can talk a little bit about some of the changes that I did make, because that was, while it was frustrating a little bit, well, I say that, but I honestly don't really feel frustrated, because when I made that decision, I knew that I could create a much better painting than I was at that point. So it was a lot more lifting and refreshing to be able to start this new one. But there were some choices that I made during the inking of this one that I wouldn't have repeated. So when I was repeating it, I knew which areas to fix. So where the smoke is coming out of the hand in this one, I did kind of this crack thing, which I ad-libbed from the sketch itself. And usually when I have these kind of deviations, they don't really go very well. I usually end up wishing that I had designed it better so that I could control the actual design. And this was one of those examples. I thought that it would be cooler in my head, but because it wasn't on the sketch, it was something that I couldn't be clear until it was too late to really take it back. So I actually do end up going back to what the original sketch is, and it's actually like this crescent-shaped hole in the hand. And I just like that it was really graphic and sharp, and I actually end up not having like this black blood or ooze or whatever you want it to be dripping out of the wound, just for the sake of it being a lot cleaner and more concise and not adding extra elements to it. So yeah, there were things like that where it's just I was able to clean it up and make it sharper and make correct decisions that I had made wrongly on the first chance. So that was really very refreshing, and it is something that I'm always looking for in my paintings, things to improve and things that I could have done better. But it's not always the case where I can actually fix it immediately. So it's a very, very exciting to be able to see those changes and see them improve. It's incredibly satisfying, actually. And every once in a while you'll see I have 3 swatches on a little scrap piece of paper, and that is my color palette, and it worked really well. I just chose what color palette I wanted to have that was triadic, and then I painted little swatches on those so I could remember back to that and keep them consistent with what the overall look needed to be. And this is just really helpful in general when you're working without a color comp that's very clear cut. Having a layout of what colors you're going to be using in that piece really does help, at least for me, to be able to go in and choose things. And since this one was so simple, it was really easy to be able to just look at these 3 colors that I knew was going to make up the entirety of the colors in this piece, and to be able to separate out how I was going to paint this one. So the background at this point I knew was absolutely not done yet. It's very flat and static, and I'm trying to think about things in ways that I can make them as dynamic as possible, especially for things that I would normally potentially overlook. So this one, where it's just this flat color, especially since it ended up very textured on accident, I knew that I wanted it to become a gradient that I could give a little bit of texture to, but mostly it would have a very uplifting quality to it, where the top would be much lighter and the bottom would be darker. And creating and maintaining highlights in watercolors is one of my key objectives lately, because I know that I can create better images when I'm able to create these lighter elements as well. So for this hand, I made sure that from the left side basically of the hand, I let this rim light happen. So by doing that, I just had a gap of white leaving the paper itself, and then I blended it into a softer red purple, and then I blended it into more of a straight purple for the shadows. And I think that it was a learning experience. I don't think it's perfect. I think the one thing that I really wish that I had done better for the lighting for this hand is that I wanted it to feel like the smoke in the crown was a little bit of this light source. And that's why I ultimately end up painting that rim lighting yellow, and then it blends in with a little bit of a pink, and then the pink into the red purple of the main local color of the hand. But if I had done it again, I would have made sure that the palm was glowing a little bit more. That would be where the highlight was, rather than a rim light all the way on one side of the hand. So I think that this definitely showed me that I need to think through very specifically how the light is going to be hitting the skin and where there's going to be significant highlights. I tend to gravitate towards these rim lightings, but I would really like to be able to create a more full and complete lighting situation. So the palm next time in a situation like this needs to be a lot more highlighted and yellow, and then it would blend out more as it rounded around. And I was really excited for this smoke area. It was something that I wanted to create a non-line worked area for it. And I think that this is a good step in me breaking out of some of the refines and constraints that I have from very clean, sharp line work, which is still something that I love, but I think having these elements makes it feel less stale and boxed in. And that was another thing that I was able to get a second chance at when I restarted this piece, because when I did the first one, I inked it, but immediately after I had regretted inking the smoke from her hand, because I realized that I wanted to try it in another way. So that gave me a great opportunity to be able to let that element be unlined, or at least unlined in the same way that the rest of the piece was. And that does help give it contrast, as well as it helps the crown come forward quite a bit. When I'm finished with this, since the crown is highlighted, or it has a black line work, there we go, it really helps it pop off of the light smoke behind it. And since eventually the smoke itself does end up yellow and the crown is yellow, I needed to make sure that those could both really clearly have a pop between the two, so that the crown would come forward, the smoke would be a second read, and they wouldn't be lost within themselves. So I did want to clean up the edges of the smoke on this one, since coloring the background and coloring the smoke itself, there's a little bit of overlap all over the place. So it was no longer a very sharp, clean line. And I could have made that happen, but I knew that eventually I'd want to have some sort of defining clean edge to it. And at first I started with a mixture of acrylic inks, but it was just way too transparent. I needed something that would cover up the edge so that it would be crisp. So I ended up going back to my trusty gouache, and what I did was, to get the correct colors, I actually just mixed in some of the watercolors that I was using to paint the smoke, and I added it to the white paint itself, and that way it still had the same colors. I didn't need to break out any other colors of gouache, and it worked really well, actually. I think that the way that I line worked the smoke is something that I could have really improved on. I'm actually happy with the final result. I don't think it sticks out too much as a sore thumb, But I do think that the general attack plan from that for that outer defining element could have been a little bit more thought out. Okay, so a few critiques for this piece. I think that I could have done better with the values between the hand and the bottom of the background. So I think the bottom of the background needed to be lightened a little bit so that the hand could be darker and it could really pop off of the background. So when you look at the bottom, the values are very, very similar. So the hand can get a little bit lost. And I also, this is more like something that I can add, but I totally didn't notice it till now, but I added a little like starburst tattoo on the finger, and it wasn't until I was looking at it later that I realized that I executed it exactly the same way as I did the crescent moon on the palm, which I actually really like. So I think I need to go back in there and add just like a little tendril of smoke coming out of that finger tattoo, just so that it has that continuity. I will need to make sure that it breaks away from the smoke shape that's behind that finger so it doesn't get lost in that and it doesn't have a weird tangent issue. But that was something that I probably should have thought of and noticed while I was working on this piece. And that is it for today. As usual, I do have the original available at my art shop, and there's a link in the description as well as in the end card. And I do have lots of other prints and buttons and all sorts of art stuff there. So if you'd like to check it out, that is over there and it is available. And a few things of note. So I have had my PO box listed in the description of my videos for the past couple months, I believe. And it wasn't until a couple days ago that I realized that I had an incomplete address listed there. So I have fixed it. It's correct. So if you did want to send me something, it's correct now and it's fixed. But I will also be participating in Inktober this year, and I will be posting daily videos, or at least almost daily. So I'm really excited about that. But when it's not Inktober, I do post every Wednesdays and Saturdays. So I'll see you guys at my next video.